Hi there, preparing for D662 OA exam can feel overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. Stick with us and we're going to help you with it. We built a free question bank for the D662 OA exam. Preparing for an OA is no joke, so our guides and practice questions are completely free. With over 100 plus success stories, we have proven our videos will help you pass your exam on the first attempt. In this video, we'll be tackling questions across 5 key areas: special education, inclusive teaching, multi-tiered support, language acquisition, culturally responsive. So let's get into it.
Question 1. A school district reviews 2 classrooms in the same building. In the first classroom, every student receives the same set of textbooks, the same printed handouts, and the same allotted time on every assessment. In the second classroom, the teacher provides large print books for a student with a vision challenge, audio versions for 2 emergent readers, and extended time for a student with a processing difference, while everyone else uses standard materials. Which approach best reflects the principle of equity in an inclusive classroom? Your options are: A. The first classroom, because identical resources guarantee fairness for every learner. B. The first classroom, because uniform expectations promote a level academic playing field. C. The second classroom, because resources and support are matched to each student's circumstances. D. The second classroom, because students with disabilities should be separated from peers. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is C. The second classroom, because resources and support are matched to each student's circumstances. C is correct because equity provides each student with the specific resources, support, and opportunities needed to reach the same outcome, taking individual strengths and circumstances into account. Matching materials to vision, reading level, and processing differences is the textbook application of equity in practice. A is wrong because identical resources describe equality, not equity. Treating everyone the same ignores the different starting points students bring into the classroom, which is exactly what the equity principle is designed to address. B is wrong because uniform expectations alone do not address differences in access or readiness. Equity is concerned with closing real gaps in support, not enforcing sameness of conditions across learners. D is wrong because equitable classrooms are inclusive by design and keep students learning alongside peers. Separating students based on disability conflicts with both equity and inclusion principles in the course material. Equity in education is the principle that fairness should be measured by outcomes, not by whether every student receives identical treatment. Understanding why these 2 ideas differ is the key to applying this concept correctly. Equality gives every student the same thing regardless of circumstance. Equity gives each student what they specifically need. Crucially, both approaches aim for the same destination, equal outcomes, but only equity accounts for different starting points. Picture 3 students struggling with the same chapter book. One receives a large print version, another an audio version, and a third gets a small group conference with the teacher. The book and the standard never change, only the support is calibrated to each student's situation. On an exam, certain phrases are reliable signals, tailored support and calibrated to need point toward equity. Identical treatment and one-size-fits-all point toward equality. When you see uniform treatment described as fair, that is almost always equality, not equity. Equity is broader than any single policy or program. It shows up anywhere a teacher adjusts materials, time, or support to meet a student where they are while holding every student to the same high standard. Question 2. 2 third-grade students struggle to read a chapter book at their assigned level. A teacher committed to equality provides each student with the exact same textbook. A teacher committed to equity does something different. Which option best describes the equity-focused response? Your options are A. Give both students the same textbook and the same amount of homework. B. Give one student a larger print version of the same book to match a specific need. C. Remove both students from the reading group until they catch up to peers. D. Reduce the reading expectations for the entire class to lower the average difficulty. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is B. Give one student a larger print version of the same book to match a specific need. B is correct because equity addresses individual needs while keeping the academic goal intact. A larger print book lets the student access the same content as peers without lowering the expectation, which is the defining feature of an equity response. A is wrong because identical resources describe equality. The whole point of equity is to depart from identical treatment when a student needs a different form of support. C is wrong because removing students from instruction is neither equity nor equality. Equity keeps students engaged with the content and adjusts how they access it. D is wrong because lowering expectations for the whole class is not the same as supporting one student. Equity targets the individual without diluting the standard for everyone else. Equality and equity both relate to fairness, but they describe two fundamentally different approaches to teaching. Understanding the distinction is essential for any inclusive educator. Equality means every student receives the same materials, the same time, the same treatment. Equity means each student receives what they specifically need to reach the same destination. Equality feels neutral. Equity requires deliberate, targeted decision-making. In practice, an equity-minded teacher might give a struggling reader an audio version of the novel, provide a large print copy to a student with a vision difference, and assign an extension task to an advanced reader. The content and expectations stay constant. Only the path changes. You can often identify which approach is being described by its signal words. Equity language includes calibrated, tailored, and matched to need. Equality language includes identical, uniform, and same materials. Crucially, equity never lowers the standard. It only changes the path a student takes to reach it. Question 3. A middle school science teacher notices that her class includes students with strong visual learning preferences, students who learn best through hands-on activity, and one student with a hearing impairment. To make sure all learners can access the unit on cell biology, the teacher plans a short reading, a labeled diagram, a hands-on model building task, and captioned video clips. Which instructional approach does the teacher most clearly illustrate? Your options are A. Norm referenced grading practices. B. Direct instruction with a single scripted format only. C. Whole class lecture as the primary mode. D. Differentiated instruction through varied content and process options. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is D. Differentiated instruction through varied content and process options. D is correct because differentiated instruction uses multiple pathways to deliver content and engage students based on their needs and preferences. Combining reading, diagrams, hands-on tasks, and captioned video is the precise pattern the approach describes. A is wrong because norm reference grading compares students to peers and is unrelated to how content is presented in the lesson. It does not address learning preferences or accessibility in any direct way. B is wrong because a scripted direct instruction format runs the same way for every learner. The scenario shows the opposite, with multiple modes used in parallel to reach different students. C is wrong because a whole class lecture as the only delivery method offers a single mode. The teacher described as using several modes at once, which is the hallmark of differentiation. Differentiated instruction is built on one key observation. No two students learned the same way. Rather than delivering a single lesson to everyone identically, skilled teachers design multiple pathways to the same learning goal. Carol Ann Tomlinson identified 4 levers teachers can adjust: content, process, product, and learning environment. Adjusting any of these creates varied pathways while keeping the academic standard, the learning goal, exactly the same for every student. In practice, a teacher identifies what every student must learn, then designs multiple entry points. Students may read, build a model, or watch a video, but every route leads to the same demonstrated mastery of the concept. The most tested distinction is differentiation versus modification. Differentiation keeps the standard intact and varies the route to it. Modification changes what the student is expected to learn. Offering the same passage in audio and print is differentiating. Simplifying it so less content is covered is modifying. When an exam stem describes a teacher offering a menu of options for engagement or output, differentiation is almost certainly the answer. Single mode delivery, no matter how engaging sites, is not differentiation. Question 4. A high school social studies teacher prepares a unit on civil rights movements and intentionally includes primary sources from Mexican American activists, Black labor organizers, Indigenous land defenders, and Asian American student groups. Several students later say they recognize their own family history in the materials for the first time. Which culturally responsive teaching strategy is the teacher most clearly applying? Your options are: A. Incorporating students' cultural backgrounds and using culturally relevant materials. B. Standardizing instruction, so every classroom uses the same canonical texts. C. Postponing diverse voices until after the standard curriculum is complete. D. Replacing all primary sources with secondary commentary for easier reading. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is A. Incorporating students' cultural backgrounds and using culturally relevant materials. A is correct because culturally responsive teaching deliberately selects materials that reflect the cultural diversity of the classroom and the broader society. Bringing in primary sources from communities represented in the class is exactly what the strategy looks like in practice. B is wrong because standardizing every classroom around the same canon erases cultural variation. That approach is the opposite of what culturally responsive teaching calls for. C is wrong because treating diverse voices as an add-on after the real curriculum signals that those voices are optional. Culturally responsive teaching integrates them from the start. D is wrong because replacing primary sources with secondary commentary strips students of direct contact with the voices the unit is meant to honor. The strategy values authentic materials, not watered-down substitutes. Culturally responsive teaching is an instructional approach that intentionally honors students' cultural backgrounds, experiences, and identities, weaving them into the curriculum, the classroom environment, and daily interactions. The core principle is simple. Students learn better when the content reflects who they are. The framework treats student culture as a genuine asset. It shows up in the books on the literature shelf, the figures featured in history units, the math word problem examples, and how teachers engage with families. The defining test is whether diverse voices sit at the center of a lesson or at the margins. Centered is responsive, marginal is not. Picture a social studies teacher building a civil rights unit who deliberately selects primary sources from Mexican American activists, Black labor organizers, Indigenous land defenders, and Asian American student groups. The topic stays anchored to the standard curriculum, but the voices delivering that history reflect the full breadth of her students' communities. On exam items, signal words like culturally relevant materials and integrating diverse voices point towards CRT. Signal words like canonical only texts or one-off heritage displays point away from it. A Heritage Month flag display is not culturally responsive teaching. Sustained integration across the year is. Finally, culturally responsive teaching never lowers expectations. It maintains rigorous standards while changing whose stories populate the curriculum. A teacher who adds diverse perspectives and still demands high analytical work is being responsive. Simplifying content for a cultural group is not the same thing. Guatmaria, and that distinction drives many common wrong answers. Question 5. At the start of the school year, a 4th grade teacher works with her students to write a list of classroom agreements that emphasize respect, empathy, listening without interrupting, and openness to perspectives that differ from one's own. The agreements are posted on the wall and revisited weekly. Which feature of an equitable environment is the teacher building? Your options are A tracked academic ranking system among classmates. B. A behavioral contract enforced only through punishment. C. A supportive and inclusive classroom where students feel safe to express themselves. D. A scripted curriculum that limits student voice during discussion. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is C. A supportive and inclusive classroom where students feel safe to express themselves. C is correct because A, supportive and inclusive classroom is built on shared norms of respect, empathy, and open expression. Co-creating and revisiting agreements that name those values is the practical way teachers establish that climate. A is wrong because a ranking system creates competition rather than belonging. It does the opposite of what an inclusive environment is designed to do. B is wrong because a punishment-only contract focuses on consequences without building the relational climate the agreements describe. The classroom being built emphasizes belonging, not enforcement. D is wrong because a scripted curriculum that suppresses student voice would block the kind of expression the agreements are meant to protect. The strategy described actively invites students into the conversation. A supportive and inclusive classroom is the relational climate that makes learning possible. It's not just about keeping order. It's about creating a space where every student feels their identity is welcomed and their voice is genuinely heard. Researchers consistently find that students who feel marginalized cannot engage fully, no matter how strong the lesson design. But when students feel they belong, they take intellectual risks and wrestle with uncomfortable ideas. That climate is built by daily teacher behavior, not posters on the wall. Inclusive classrooms are constructed deliberately. Teachers and students co-create shared norms around respect, empathy, and open-mindedness at the start of the year. Those norms are posted at eye level and revisited regularly so they stay alive rather than fading into wall decoration. The key exam distinction is that a quiet, orderly classroom is not automatically an inclusive one. A strict compliance system can silence the room without welcoming student identity. Inclusion requires room for student voice, even when that voice introduces disagreement or discomfort. When an exam stem describes a teacher co-creating and revisiting norms with students, that's the inclusive classroom. When it describes a teacher enforcing silence without conversation, that's behavior management. And those two things are not the same. Question 6. A district leader pulls graduation rate data and finds that students from one neighborhood, where most families are recent immigrants and many work multiple jobs, graduate on time at a noticeably lower rate than students from a wealthier neighborhood across town. Curriculum, teachers, and grading rules are the same in both schools. Which concept best names the disparity the leader is seeing? Your options are A skill gap rooted in student ability differences alone. B, an opportunity gap driven by systemic disparities in access and resources. C, a motivation gap that can be solved by stricter homework policies. D, an achievement bonus reserved for higher income communities. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is B, an opportunity gap driven by systemic disparities in access and resources. B is correct because the opportunity gap describes disparities in access to resources and opportunities tied to factors such as income, language background, and family circumstances. Identical curriculum cannot offset the unequal conditions students live within outside the school day. R is wrong because a skill gap blames the students for differences that actually trace back to access. The course material is explicit that the source is systemic, not individual ability. C is wrong because stricter homework policies do nothing to address transportation, work schedules, or out-of-school resource gaps. Treating motivation as the cause misreads the problem entirely. D is wrong because there is no recognized concept of an achievement bonus tied to higher income status. The disparity is a gap, not a reward. The opportunity gap describes the unequal distribution of resources and conditions that shape students' academic trajectories long before any test is given. It's not about what students produce, it's about what they receive. The achievement gap measures outcome differences, test scores, graduation rates. The opportunity gap sits upstream of those outcomes, describing the unequal inputs, school funding, neighborhood resources, healthcare, language access, and out-of-school enrichment. The gap in opportunity produces the gap in achievement. The mechanism is structural. Two students may sit in equally excellent classrooms, but the conditions outside school, housing stability, neighborhood resources, family income, are not equal. Those upstream differences shape what each student brings to the learning environment. On exam items, signal words matter. Words like systemic, structural, resource inequity, and conditions outside the school point toward the opportunity gap. Words like motivation, effort, ability, and individual choice point away from it. They locate the problem in the student, not in the system. Good teaching matters, but it cannot alone offset unequal conditions in housing, transportation, or community resources. Closing the opportunity gap requires policy and community-level action. When a STEM describes a disparity rooted in access, not behavior, the opportunity gap is your answer. Question 7. A principal is concerned that students from low-income families in his building lack consistent access to nutritious meals, reliable transportation, and after-school enrichment. He drafts proposals for the district board that would secure funding for breakfast programs, expand bus routes, and offer free after-school tutoring. Which approach to closing the opportunity gap is the principal taking? Your options are: A. Reducing instructional time to redirect funds to social services. B. Treating the gap as a private family responsibility. C. Replacing certified teachers with volunteers to cut costs. D. Advocating for and implementing policies that prioritize equitable resource distribution. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is D. Advocating for and implementing policies that prioritize equitable resource distribution. D is correct because advocating for equitable policy is one of the core strategies for closing the opportunity gap because it addresses the systemic conditions that produce inequity. Pursuing funding for meals, transportation, and enrichment is the textbook example. A is wrong because cutting instructional time creates a new gap rather than closing the original one. The strategy adds wraparound support without removing core instruction. B is wrong because framing the gap as a family responsibility leaves systemic conditions untouched. The course material is clear that schools and communities share the duty here. C is wrong because swapping certified teachers for volunteers degrades the quality of instruction. The opportunity gap widens when instructional quality drops. The opportunity gap is a structural problem, which means it cannot be solved by classroom instruction alone. One of the named strategies for closing it is advocating for and implementing equitable policies, and the framework treats this as a core part of the educator's professional role, not a separate activity. Because the opportunity gap is structural, changing it requires redirecting resources at the district, state, and federal levels. Educators are uniquely positioned to drive that change because their professional perspective is exactly what policy decisions require. The strategy includes concrete actions, securing funding for free or reduced price meals, expanding transportation routes, building healthcare partnerships inside the school, and advocating for affordable housing that stabilizes families. Each action targets a structural condition that produces the gap. Picture a principal who drafts 3 proposals for his district board. 1 to fund a school breakfast program, 1 to expand the late activity bus, and 1 to bring clinic services on site. None of these change his teaching. All of them change the structural conditions his students face. On exam items, watch for signal phrases like securing funding, expanding access, and resource allocation. Those point to this strategy. Options that frame advocacy as outside the teacher's role are wrong. The framework explicitly defines policy advocacy as integrated professional practice. Question 8. A new teacher serving a diverse middle school decides to adjust her curriculum to reflect students' cultural backgrounds, build on the experiences students bring into the room, and use texts written by authors from communities her students recognize. Which strategy for closing the opportunity gap is she using? Your options are A. Adopting culturally responsive teaching that honors student backgrounds. B. Eliminating any reference to student culture to maintain neutrality. C. Restricting curriculum changes to the principal's pre-approved list only. D. Replacing literature with worksheet packets to standardize instruction. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is A. Adopting culturally responsive teaching that honors student backgrounds. A is correct because culturally responsive teaching is named explicitly as a strategy for closing the opportunity gap. It honors student identity, draws on student experience, and integrates relevant materials into the curriculum. B is wrong because a neutrality stance erases identity rather than supporting it. The opportunity gap is partly produced by curricula that ignore students' lived experiences. C is wrong because curriculum changes can certainly involve a principal, but restricting culturally responsive choices to a pre-approved list is not what the strategy describes. The teacher is acting on informed planning of her own. D is wrong because worksheet packets eliminate the cultural relevance the strategy is meant to introduce. Standardization for its own sake is the opposite of culturally responsive practice. Culturally responsive teaching is one of the key strategies for closing the opportunity gap. It recognizes that the gap is not only material, it is also cultural. When students cannot see themselves in the curriculum, engagement and motivation suffer. The strategy operates at 3 levels. At the curriculum level, teachers select text and examples that reflect classroom diversity. At the instructional level, they draw on students' background experiences. At the relationship level, they build trust with families and communities beyond the classroom. In practice, a teacher might redesign a literature unit so authors from multiple communities appear throughout, not added on at the end, but woven into the standards from the start. Students bring their own histories into writing assignments and the literacy standards remain fully intact. A critical distinction on exams is the difference between culturally responsive teaching and tokenism. Tokenism adds a marginalized community's story as an afterthought. Responsive teaching integrates diverse perspectives throughout and treats them as central to the content, not supplementary. Culturally responsive teaching applies in every classroom, not just visibly diverse ones. Every student carries cultural identity, and the framework expects teachers to recognize and build on that wherever they teach. Question 9. A community liaison at a Title Wien elementary school sets up monthly family literacy nights, partners with a local food pantry to send weekend backpacks home, and trains parents in a strategy for asking their children open-ended reading questions. Which opportunity gap action is most clearly represented here? Your options are A. Removing families from the educational decision-making process. B. Replacing classroom instruction with parent-led tutoring. C. Collaboration with families and communities to support student learning. D. Outsourcing literacy entirely to non-profit partners. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is C. Collaboration with families and communities to support student learning. C is correct because closing the opportunity gap relies on schools, families, and community partners working together. The activities described, including family literacy nights, food access, and parent training, are exactly the partnership pattern the strategy calls for. A is wrong because the whole point of the action is the opposite. Families are being brought into the educational process, not pushed out of it. B is wrong because parent-led tutoring is not replacing classroom instruction. The liaison is layering family engagement on top of regular school programming. D is wrong because outsourcing implies the school steps back, but the school is actively running the literacy nights and the parent training. Community partners support the work rather than absorb it. The third strategy for closing the opportunity gap is collaboration with families and communities. This goes far beyond simply informing families about what's happening at school. It means building genuine, active partnerships that multiply what any single school can accomplish. The critical distinction is that collaboration is two-way. Sending a newsletter home is communication. It is not collaboration. True collaboration means families and community partners contribute knowledge, shape decisions, and share responsibility for outcomes alongside the school. The framework pictures the school not as an island but as one node in a wider network. Families, faith communities, non-profits, public agencies, and local businesses all hold resources the school alone cannot deploy. Genuine partnership draws all of those resources into the work. Concrete practices include hosting accessible family events with translation, transportation, and childcare, partnering with food pantries for weekend hunger, training parents in at-home reading and math strategies, and recruiting community members as mentors and tutors. The activities vary, but the logic is consistent. Remember, engagement can be passive, but collaboration is always active. Parents who sign a permission slip are engaged. Parents who shape decisions and contribute resources are collaborators. The opportunity gap framework demands collaboration, and exam items will test exactly that distinction. Question 10. A new teacher attends a professional development session on the opportunity gap. The facilitator lists several systemic factors that commonly produce the gap. Which set most accurately captures those factors as the course material describes them? Your options are A. Curriculum difficulty, length of school year, and teacher tenure. B. Race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, English proficiency, and family background. C. Class size, lunch menu rotation, and bell schedule structure. D. Standardized test publisher, font size, and color of school uniforms. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is B. Race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, English proficiency, and family background. B is correct because the opportunity gap is rooted in systemic disparities tied to race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, English proficiency, and family background. Those categories appear directly in the material as the drivers of unequal access. A is wrong because tenure and school year length affect schools broadly, but are not the systemic drivers the framework names. They are not what produces the gap for marginalized students. C is wrong because class size and bell schedules are scheduling concerns, not the structural factors the framework identifies. Marketing those as the cause misses the actual source. D is wrong because test publishers and uniform colors have no meaningful link to the opportunity gap. The factors listed describe the deeper social conditions outside the school's walls. The opportunity gap isn't explained by anything inside individual students. It's produced by a cluster of systemic factors, social conditions that shape resources and opportunities from birth through the school years. Decades of research identify 5 primary drivers: race and ethnicity, socioeconomic status, English proficiency, and family background. These aren't personal traits, they are social positions with structural consequences that compound over time. Each factor works through layers. Income shapes housing, which determines school district assignment, which controls per pupil funding, which affects classroom conditions. Race intersects housing markets, looping back into school assignment. Every layer compounds the others, which is why the gap is persistent and resists single-issue fixes. A critical exam distinction: systemic factors like race, socioeconomic status, English proficiency, and family background are the framework's accepted causes. Explanations rooted in individual motivation, intelligence, or effort are explicitly rejected as primary causes, Haste say. They locate the problem inside the student rather than in the conditions surrounding them. When you see a disparity described in terms of conditions beyond the student's control, the systemic factors framework applies. When an answer choice blames student traits, the framework pushes back. The correct answer always points outward, to structure, not to character. Question 11. A district adopts a framework that uses universal supports for all students, layered, targeted small group support for students who need more, and intensive, individualized support for the most struggling learners. The framework operates on prevention and aims to identify needs early. Which framework best matches this description? Your options are A. Standardized testing protocol, B. Norm reference grading, C. Direct instruction only model, D. Multi-tiered system of supports. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is D. Multi-tiered system of supports. D is correct because a multi-tiered system of supports is the evidence-based framework that provides universal, targeted, and intensive supports in a tiered structure. Its prevention orientation and early identification of needs are defining features the course material names directly. A is wrong because standardized testing is an assessment activity, not a support framework. It does not provide tiered intervention or layered services. B is wrong because norm reference grading ranks students against each other. It says nothing about prevention or layered support of any kind. C is wrong because a direct instruction only model is one teaching technique. The framework described is broader and incorporates many strategies across tiers. The multi-tiered system of supports is an evidence-based framework that integrates academic, behavioral, social, and emotional supports under one structure. It grew from earlier models like response to intervention and positive behavioral interventions and supports, combining both into a single school-wide approach. The framework operates through 3 tiers. The first tier delivers high-quality core instruction and a positive climate for every student. The second tier adds small group targeted supports, and the third tier provides intensive one-on-one intervention for students with the greatest needs. Crucially, the tiers are not permanent labels for students. They are levels of support that students move into and out of dynamically, driven by data. A student may start at any tier, and movement in either direction reflects changing needs, not a fixed sequence. One critical exam distinction: MTSS is not synonymous with special education. The framework serves all students within general education. Special education services may sometimes overlap with the third tier, but receiving intensive supports does not mean a student qualifies for or is placed in special education. The defining features of MTSS are its prevention orientation, layered intensity, and data-driven movement between tiers. When a question describes a school identifying struggles early and adjusting supports fluidly, MTSS is the answer. Question 12. A second grade teacher uses high-quality core instruction, conducts beginning of year universal screenings in reading and math for the whole class, and implements school-wide positive behavior supports. Most students respond well and meet grade level expectations. Which MTSS tier is the teacher operating in? Your options are A. Tier 1 universal supports for all students, B. Tier 2 targeted supports for some students, C. Tier 3 intensive individualized supports, D. A special education self-contained classroom. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is A. Tier 1 universal supports for all students. It is correct because Tier 1 provides universal supports for all students within the general education setting through high-quality core instruction, universal screening, and positive behavior supports. Most students should respond well at this level, which is exactly what the scenario describes. B is wrong because Tier 2 is for students who demonstrate mild to moderate challenges not adequately met by Tier 1. The teacher here is working with the whole class on universal supports. C is wrong because Tier 3 is individualized and intensive, reserved for students with the most significant needs. Class-wide universal screening is not Tier 3 work. D is wrong because a self-contained classroom is a specific placement decision tied to special education and not the standard description of any MTSS tier. Tier 1 is the foundation of the multi-tiered system of supports. It delivers universal instruction and proactive supports to every student in the general education classroom. Not a selected subset, but all students. Tier 1 is built from 4 active components: high-quality core instruction aligned to standards, universal screening conducted at the start of the year, explicit positive behavior expectations, and ongoing progress monitoring so data drives decisions. Picture a classroom where the teacher screens every student at the start of the year, delivers instruction from an evidence-based curriculum, and reinforces consistent behavior expectations. That classroom is fully operating within Tier 1, not because nothing else exists, but because these systems are actively designed and running. Tier 1 is the floor of the support system, not a destination for struggling students. Because most students learn through it, most of the systems impact lives here. When Tier 1 is weak, students get pushed unnecessarily into higher tiers, creating a bottleneck that better universal instruction would have prevented. When exam items show a weakly designed classroom and ask what the school should do, the framework's answer is to strengthen Tier 1, not layer Tier 2 and Tier 3 on top of a broken foundation. Tier 1 is an active design system, not simply the absence of intervention. Question 13. A 4th grade teacher notices that a group of 5 students is reading below grade level despite high quality whole class instruction. She pulls those students into a small group 3 times a week for 30 minutes of supplemental reading practice and monitors their progress weekly. Which MTSS tier is the teacher implementing? Your options are A. Tier 1 because the teacher is delivering the supplemental sessions herself, B. A pre-referral evaluation for special education services, C. Tier 2 targeted small group intervention for students needing more support. D. Tier 3 intensive individualized intervention. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is C. Tier 2 targeted small group intervention for students needing more support. C is correct because Tier 2 targets students with mild to moderate challenges through small group supplemental instruction provided by the classroom teacher. A small reading group of about 5 students with weekly progress monitoring is the textbook example. A is wrong because although the teacher delivers the support, the defining feature is the supplemental small group setting and the targeted purpose. That places the work at Tier 2, not Tier 1. B is wrong because pre-referral evaluations are a different process used to determine special education eligibility. The teacher is delivering ongoing intervention, not running an evaluation. D is wrong because Tier 3 involves intensive, individualized supports for the most significant challenges. A small group of students working on grade-level reading does not meet that threshold. Tier 2 sits in the middle of the multi-tiered support framework, designed for students who need more than universal instruction, but do not yet require the most intensive services the system provides. Understanding what makes Tier 2 distinct is essential for applying the framework correctly. Tier 2 is defined by 4 key features. It is always supplemental. Students keep receiving Tier 1 while gaining Tier 2 on top. Instruction happens in small groups of 3 to 5. Progress is monitored weekly or bi-weekly so the team can adjust quickly. And critically, it remains within general education, delivered by a classroom teacher or general education staff member. Visually, the framework stacks the tiers. Tier 1 forms the broad foundation for all students. Tier 2 is the middle band, narrower, more focused, and always built on top of that foundation. Tier 3 sits above for students who need the most intensive support. Group size alone does not define Tier 2. What matters is that the students are specifically identified as needing extra support beyond universal instruction, that the work is supplemental rather than a replacement, and that data drives ongoing decisions about intensity and duration. On exams, Tier 2 is sometimes mistaken for special education because the support feels intensive. Remember, supplemental small group work within general education is Tier 2. A special education referral is a separate process with separate eligibility criteria entirely. Question 14. A 5th grade student continues to struggle with math despite high-quality core instruction and several months of small group Tier 2 support. The school team designs a daily one-on-one intervention with a math interventionist, builds an individualized support plan, and meets weekly to review data. Which MTSS tier is the team implementing? Your options are A. Tier 1 Universal Supports, B. Tier 3 Intensive Individualized Intervention, C. Out-of-district referral for evaluation, D. A peer-led tutoring program at Tier 2. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is B. Tier 3 Intensive Individualized Intervention. B is correct because Tier 3 provides intensive, individualized support tailored to students with significant academic or behavioral challenges and often involves a subject matter interventionist. Daily one-on-one work with a math interventionist plus an individualized plan is the defining pattern. A is wrong because Tier 1 supports are universal and given to all students. They are not individualized in the way the scenario describes. C is wrong because an out-of-district referral is a placement decision, not a tier of MTSS intervention. The student is still being served within the regular school structure. D is wrong because peer-led tutoring is not the level of intensity Tier 3 requires. Tier 3 is delivered by trained educators or specialists, not by peers. Tier 3 is the most intensive layer of a multi-tiered support framework. designed for students whose challenges persist even after universal and targeted interventions. It is defined by its depth, not by a placement or label. 4 features define Tier 3. Instruction happens one-on-one or in very small groups. It is led by a trained specialist. It is guided by an individualized support plan with specific goals. And progress is monitored at least weekly so the team can adjust quickly. Tier 3 is a team effort. The interventionist, classroom teacher, school counselor, and family all coordinate around one shared individualized plan. Each member plays a distinct role in the student's progress. A critical distinction: Tier 3 is a level of support within general education, while special education is a legal placement governed by federal IDEA eligibility criteria. Intensity of instruction alone does not establish eligibility for special education. Movement between tiers is dynamic. A student can enter Tier 3 quickly when data shows a need and return to lower tiers as progress builds. The framework expects educators to treat tiers as flexible tools, not fixed labels. Question 15. At every tier of the MTSS framework, a teacher regularly assesses a student's progress and adjusts the intervention based on the data she collects. The course material identifies this ongoing process as a critical part of what makes the framework work. Which process is being described? Your options are A. Universal screening administered only at the start of the year. B. Annual standardized test administration. C. Parent-teacher conferencing once per quarter. D. Response to intervention, which monitors student progress to adjust supports. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is D. Response to intervention, which monitors student progress to adjust supports. D is correct because response to intervention is the regular monitoring of student progress to ensure effective instruction and to adjust supports as needed. The course material names it as a key component across all MTSS tiers. A is wrong because universal screening identifies students at the start of the year but is not the continuous adjustment process described. The response to intervention cycle continues throughout the year. B is wrong because annual standardized testing is a yearly snapshot, not the ongoing monitoring that drives intervention decisions during instruction. C is wrong because parent conferences are communication events. They are not the data collection process that powers adjustment of interventions. Response to intervention is the continuous data and adjustment loop that runs through every tier of a multi-tiered support system. It is not a one-time event or a form to fill out. It is an ongoing discipline of monitoring student progress and changing course when the data says to. The mechanism works as a recurring cycle. The teacher delivers an evidence-based intervention, collects brief progress data frequently, often weekly, and then compares that data to an expected growth trajectory. If the student is not on track, the team adjusts. Adjustments are not limited to one option. The team might increase instructional time, reduce the group size for more targeted support, or move the student to a more intensive tier altogether. The key is that the data drives which adjustment is made. Exam items often test one critical distinction. Collecting data is not the same as responding to it. A teacher who monitors progress but never adjusts the intervention is not practicing RTI. RTI also is not the entire MTSS framework. It is one specific component within it. Remember, RTI is the structured loop that prevents students from languishing in interventions that are not working. Without the adjustment step, the monitoring is meaningless. Question 16. At the beginning of the school year, every student in a third grade classroom is given a brief reading assessment and a brief math assessment to identify any students who may need additional support early on. Which critical component of Tier 1 is the school using? Your options are A. Universal screening to identify students who may need additional support. B. An individualized support plan reviewed weekly. C. A token economy reward system used during recess. D. A formal special education eligibility determination. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is A. Universal screening to identify students who may need additional support. A is correct because universal screening is the Tier 1 component that gives every student a brief assessment at the start of the year to identify those who may need additional support. The scenario matches the description directly. B is wrong because individualized support plans are a Tier 3 component, not a universal Tier 1 screening practice. They are tailored to individual students with significant needs. C is wrong because a token economy is a behavior reinforcement system, not a screening practice. It does not identify students for additional academic support. D is wrong because an eligibility determination is a special education process, not a Tier 1 component. Universal screening sits much earlier in the support sequence. Universal screening is the practice of giving every student a brief assessment to identify who may need extra support. It's a foundational part of Tier 1 in a multi-tiered system of supports, and it runs on a simple principle: catch students early, before they fall further behind. Waiting for students to fail wastes valuable time. Early identification prevents skill gaps from widening, and because some students mask their difficulties in a busy classroom, screening every student catches those who would otherwise go unnoticed. Here is how it works in practice. Every student takes a short, valid screening tool aligned to grade level skills. The team reviews the data, identifies students who fall below an established benchmark, and designs a follow-up plan, which may include additional assessment or a Tier 2 intervention group. A critical distinction is that screening is not the same as diagnostic assessment. A screening tool flags which students need a closer look. It does not diagnose a learning disability or pinpoint a specific deficit. Misusing a screening result as a diagnosis is a common exam trap. Finally, universal screening belongs firmly at Tier 1 because every student participates, not just those already struggling. The interventions that follow may be at Tier 2 or higher, but the screen itself is always a Tier 1 activity. Question 17. At every tier of MTSS, a school commits to checking how students are doing on a regular schedule, recording the data, and making instructional adjustments based on the results. Which critical component is the school operationalizing? Your options are A. Curriculum mapping at the district level. B. End-of-year summative testing alone. C. Progress monitoring that informs adjustments to instruction. D. Parent-teacher conferences scheduled twice a year. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is C. Progress monitoring that informs adjustments to instruction. C is correct because progress monitoring involves regular assessment of student response to instruction and intervention so that adjustments can be made. The course material listed as a critical component at every tier of MTSS. A is wrong because curriculum mapping focuses on what content is taught and when. It does not capture the cycle of measurement and adjustment that progress monitoring describes. B is wrong because end-of-year summative testing is one snapshot. It does not provide the ongoing data that progress monitoring requires. D is wrong because parent conferences communicate results but are not the systematic data collection process the framework names. Progress monitoring runs continuously throughout the school year. Progress monitoring is a recurring practice of collecting data on student learning and using it to adjust instruction. Not a one-time event, but a continuous feedback loop built into everyday teaching. The defining features are regularity and responsiveness. Teachers use brief, aligned measures on a fixed schedule, chart the results so trends are visible, and adjust instruction based on what the data shows. It's important not to confuse progress monitoring with summative assessment. Progress monitoring happens during instruction to shape what comes next, while summative assessment happens after instruction to evaluate what was learned. Progress monitoring runs through every tier of the multi-tiered system of supports. Weighty, not just tiers 2 and 3. Tier 1 requires it too. The frequency increases with intervention intensity, but the practice belongs at every level. A common exam trap is assuming progress monitoring belongs only to students in intervention. The framework requires it school-wide. When monitoring stops at Tier 1, the system is incomplete. Question 18. A school launches a building-wide initiative that defines clear behavior expectations, teaches those expectations explicitly to students, and uses positive reinforcement systems to encourage them. The goal is to build a positive climate that prevents behavior problems before they appear. Which Tier 1 component is the school implementing? Your options are A. Tier 3 Individualized Behavior Intervention Plan. B. Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports. C. A Formal Suspension and Expulsion Policy. D. A peer mediation circle activated only for ongoing conflicts. Take a second, which answer would you pick? The correct answer is B. Positive behavioral interventions and supports. B is correct because positive behavioral interventions and supports are a proactive Tier 1 component that teaches and reinforces positive behavior school-wide. Building-wide expectations, explicit teaching, and reinforcement systems describe this approach directly. A is wrong because a Tier 3 Individualized Behavior Plan is for one student with significant needs. The scenario describes a building-wide initiative for all students. C is wrong because a suspension policy is reactive and punishment-oriented. The Tier 1 approach deliberately focuses on prevention and positive reinforcement instead. D is wrong because a peer mediation circle is one intervention strategy for resolving conflicts after they happen. The Tier 1 component is broader and runs before problems occur, not only after. Positive behavioral interventions and supports is a proactive, school-wide framework that teaches expected behaviors rather than simply punishing unwanted ones. Instead of reacting to misbehavior, it prevents it by building a positive climate across the entire building. PBIS treats behavior the way schools treat academics. Students receive explicit instruction in what is expected, see it modeled, practice it, and receive feedback and reinforcement, the same cycle used to teach reading or math. A behavior matrix maps each expectation to specific settings across the school. Every adult teaches and reinforces the same expectations in the classroom, hallway, cafeteria, and beyond, ensuring consistency throughout the building. A common exam trap is equating PBIS with reward systems alone. Handing out tokens without teaching expectations is not PBIS. The framework is broader, proactive teaching and a positive school-wide climate, with reinforcement as just one supporting piece. PBIS does not eliminate consequences for serious misbehavior. It pairs them with teaching and reinforcement. The goal is to prevent the next incident through a coordinated, proactive system rather than relying on punishment alone. Question 19. A grade level team meets every 2 weeks to review student performance data, identify trends in academic and behavioral progress, and adjust the intensity and duration of interventions for individual students. Which critical component of MTSS is the team practicing? Your options are A. Curriculum standardization across grade levels. B. A check-in and check-out behavior support system. C. Universal screening of all students. D. Data-based decision-making to inform instructional practices. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is D. Data-based decision-making to inform instructional practices. D is correct because data-based decision-making involves collecting and analyzing student performance and behavior data to adjust instruction and intervention. The bi-weekly review described is the precise pattern the framework names. A is wrong because curriculum standardization aims for consistency in content delivery. It is not the data-driven adjustment process the team is using. B is wrong because a check-in and check-out system is a Tier 2 behavior intervention for individual students. It is not the team-level data review the scenario describes. C is wrong because universal screening is one input the team might use, but the activity described is the analysis and adjustment, not the initial screen. Data-based decision-making is the practice of using student performance data to drive instructional and intervention choices. It is a core component of multi-tiered systems of support at every tier. Not just a record-keeping habit, but an active decision loop. The framework draws on several data types: progress monitoring, screening, behavior referrals, and attendance. This broader scope is what separates data-based decision-making from progress monitoring alone, which is just one input into the larger system. The mechanism operates at 3 levels. At the classroom level, teachers use regular data to plan weekly instruction. At the grade team level, recurring meetings identify cross-classroom trends. At the building level, leadership uses outcome data to allocate resources and plan professional development. The critical distinction is that collecting data is not the same as using it. Data must be analyzed, a decision must be made, and instruction or intervention must be adjusted. A school that gathers extensive data but never changes practice is collecting, not deciding. When an exam stem describes a team meeting regularly to review data and adjust practice, the framework is present. When a team meets but nothing changes, it is absent. The framework requires the link between data and action, always. Question 20. A third grade teacher providing Tier 2 reading support sends home weekly updates to parents about their child's progress, holds 2 parent meetings about the intervention plan, and shares specific strategies parents can use at home to reinforce the reading skills being practiced. Which critical component of Tier 2 is the teacher operationalizing? Your options are A. Enhance family engagement to support the intervention process. B. Building-wide positive behavioral expectations. C. Universal screening for all students. D. Removal of family involvement to standardize the intervention. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is A. Enhance family engagement to support the intervention process. A is correct, because enhanced family engagement is a Tier 2 component that brings parents into the intervention process through regular updates, meetings, and at-home strategies. The teacher's actions match the description point for point. B is wrong because building-wide positive behavioral expectations are a Tier 1 component focused on the whole school. It is not the family engagement process being described. C is wrong because universal screening is a Tier 1 activity that assesses all students, not the parent involvement work being described. D is wrong because removing family involvement is the opposite of what the Tier 2 strategy calls for. Tier 2 deliberately strengthens family engagement rather than eliminating it. At Tier 2, family engagement isn't optional. It's a structural component of how the intervention works. The moment a student moves beyond universal support, the partnership with their family must intensify deliberately. Enhanced engagement has 3 defining features: two-way communication, intervention-specific content, and increased frequency. A school newsletter sent to all families is general communication. Enhanced engagement names the student, names the skill, and invites the family to respond. In practice, this means weekly progress updates, concrete at-home skill strategies written in accessible language, parent input meetings to adjust the plan, and translation services so every family can participate equally. Each action is tied directly to the intervention the student is receiving. Think of it as a loop. The school delivers the intervention, sends a specific update home, the family reinforces the skill, and their observations feed back into the plan. Without that loop, the school is working in isolation and the impact of the intervention is cut short. When an exam item describes routine parent communication with no reference to the intervention, enhanced engagement is absent. When it describes a teacher sharing weekly, intervention-specific updates and gathering family input, the practice is present. Family engagement is part of the architecture, not a soft add-on. Question 21. A new teacher wants to design lessons that align with the science of learning by providing all students equitable access to learning opportunities. She reads about an educational framework built on 3 principles: multiple means of representation, multiple means of action and expression, and multiple means of engagement. Which framework is she studying? Your options are A. Multi-tiered system of supports. B. Response to intervention. C. Universal design for learning. D. The cluster of 5 concept coverage approach. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is C. Universal design for learning. C is correct because universal design for learning is built explicitly on 3 principles, including multiple means of representation, action and expression, and engagement. The framework aims to create flexible learning environments that accommodate differences across students. A is wrong because a multi-tiered system of supports is a tiered system of academic and behavioral supports. It is not organized around the 3 principles named. B is wrong because response to intervention is a progress monitoring component within the larger support system. It does not name the 3 principles as its structure. D is wrong because a cluster of 5 concept coverage approach is not a recognized educational framework in the course materials. It is not what the teacher is studying. Universal design for learning is a proactive educational framework built on the science of how students learn. Rather than waiting for a student to request support, it designs flexibility into every lesson from the very beginning, assuming variation among learners is the norm, not the exception. The framework rests on 3 core principles. Multiple means of representation let students access content through varied modalities. Multiple means of action and expression give students varied ways to demonstrate learning. Multiple means of engagement provides choice and relevance to sustain motivation across the full instructional cycle. Imagine a 5th grade teacher who offers 4 versions of the same historical content and multiple ways to show understanding. So you are so a written essay, an oral presentation, or a digital infographic. Every student is held to the same standard, but the pathways through the unit multiply to fit the real variation in the room. A critical exam distinction, UDL is universal by design, shaping lessons for the whole class before any specific need arises. It does not require an individualized plan. Accommodations under special education law are reactive and student-specific. A teacher who waits for a request before adjusting her lesson is not applying UDL. UDL is also distinct from differentiated instruction, which adjusts after the teacher observes variation. UDL designs for variation before knowing any specific student's needs. When you see proactive, flexible, whole class design on an exam stem, that is UDL at work. Question 22. A history teacher presents the causes of the Industrial Revolution through a short article, an animated video with captions, an interactive timeline, and a podcast clip during one lesson. Which UDL principle is the teacher applying? Your options are A. Multiple means of engagement to spark motivation. B. Multiple means of representation to present information in varied ways. C. Multiple means of action and expression for student output. D. None, because UDL applies only to students with disabilities. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is B. Multiple means of representation to present information in varied ways. B is correct because multiple means of representation centers on presenting information in varied ways so that students with different learning preferences can access content. Combining article, video, timeline, and podcast is the exact pattern of representation. A is wrong because multiple means of engagement is about how students are motivated to engage with material. The teacher is delivering content, not designing motivation choices. C is wrong because multiple means of action and expression is about how students demonstrate learning. The teacher is presenting content, not collecting student output. D is wrong because UDL is a universal framework for all students. The course material is explicit that it is not limited to students with disabilities. Multiple means of representation is the universal design for learning principle about how content reaches students. The core idea is simple. No single mode of delivery works for everyone. So teachers design varied input formats into every lesson. Students vary in how their brains take in information. Some learn best through reading, others through listening, others through visuals, and others through concrete examples. None of these preferences is weaker than the others. Wait, they reflect normal human variation. Imagine a history teacher who introduces the same content through a reading, a captioned video, an interactive timeline, and a podcast clip. Each format covers identical material. Students engage through whichever mode works best for them. That input variety is representation in action. The most common exam trap is confusing representation with the other two UDL principles. Representation is about how content enters the student's mind. Action and expression covers how students demonstrate learning. Engagement covers motivation. When varied input formats are the focus, representation is always the answer. A final point worth remembering: representation does not require expensive tools. A teacher who reads aloud, draws a diagram on the board, and tells an anchoring story is already using 3 modes of representation. The principle is a design philosophy, not a budget item. Question 23. At the end of a unit on ecosystems, a science teacher offers students a choice of demonstrating their understanding through a written report, a recorded oral presentation, a digital infographic, or a hands-on diorama. Each option is graded against the same content standards. Which UDL principle is the teacher applying? Your options are: A. Universal screening across the class. B. Multiple means of representation. C. Multiple means of engagement. D. Multiple means of action and expression. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is D. Multiple means of action and expression. D is correct because multiple means of action and expression focuses on giving students varied ways to demonstrate their understanding. Offering written, oral, digital, or hands-on output is the textbook example of this principle. A is wrong because universal screening is a Tier 1 assessment practice, not a UDL principle. It is unrelated to choice of output format. B is wrong because multiple means of representation is about how content is presented, not how students show what they have learned. C is wrong because multiple means of engagement is about motivating students through choice and relevance. The choices here are about output format, which sits under action and expression. Universal design for learning's principle of multiple means of action and expression is about how learning goes out. The ways students demonstrate what they know, unlike representation, which governs how content comes in. This principle focuses entirely on the output side of learning. The key insight is that the form of an output is not the same as the depth of knowledge behind it. A student who struggles with essays may know the material deeply. Designing for varied output separates content mastery from format preference, without ever lowering the standard. Teachers applying this principle offer students genuine choice across formats: written work, oral presentations, digital products, hands-on models, podcasts, or artistic creations. Every option is held to the same content standard, so rigor is fully preserved across all formats. Imagine a single content standard, say, understanding the water cycle, assessed through a labeled diagram, a written essay, or a digital infographic. Each format demands the same depth of understanding. The rubric is built around content, not format, so rigorous grading and varied outputs coexist. When you see a teacher offering several ways for students to show what they know, all graded against the same content expectations, that is multiple means of action and expression in action. Varied outputs and rigorous grading are not in conflict. They are the point. Question 24. A teacher launches a science unit by surveying students about their interests, then offers project options tied to those interests, builds in opportunities for student choice during the unit, and connects each lesson to a real-world problem in the community. Which UDL principle is most clearly at work? Your options are: A. Multiple means of engagement to motivate and sustain interest. B. Multiple means of representation only. C. Multiple means of action and expression only. D. Direct instruction with a scripted format. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is A. Multiple means of engagement to motivate and sustain interest. A is correct because multiple means of engagement centers on fostering motivation and interest by offering choice, autonomy, relevance, and personalization. Interest surveys, choice, and real-world relevance are the practical levers this principle describes. B is wrong because multiple means of representation is about how content is delivered. It is not the motivation strategy the teacher is using. C is wrong because multiple means of action and expression is about output formats. The teacher's emphasis on interest and relevance points to engagement, not expression. D is wrong because direct instruction with a scripted format runs uniformly. The teacher is doing the opposite by personalizing the unit around student interests. Engagement is the third principle of universal design for learning, and it's the one most often left to chance. The UDL framework insists that motivation must be deliberately designed into a lesson, not assumed to appear on its own. Research in educational psychology shows that genuine engagement rests on three things: a sense of choice and ownership, relevance to the learner's own life, and challenge calibrated just right so effort feels productive rather than overwhelming. In practice, a teacher designs for engagement by offering meaningful choice points, connecting content to students' communities, and adjusting challenge through scaffolding. She uses interest surveys and check-ins to weave what students care about directly into the lesson. Here is the key exam distinction. Choice and ownership and real-world relevance are markers of the engagement principle. A fun game alone or a sticker system does not qualify. Those are entertainment or compliance tools, not the intrinsic motivation the framework calls for. Whenever you see a STEM describing meaningful student choice and personal relevance, the engagement principle is at work. When the lesson is just fun or rewards are extrinsic, it is not. Question 25. A district trainer explains that universal design for learning can support every tier of MTSS by guiding how universal lessons are designed at Tier 1, by informing flexible targeted approaches at Tier 2, and by shaping individualized supports at Tier 3. Which best describes the relationship the trainer is illustrating? Your options are A. The framework is unrelated to MTSS and is used in special education only. B. The framework provides design guidance that applies across all 3 MTSS tiers. C. The framework replaces MTSS in modern inclusive classrooms. D. The framework operates only at Tier 3 because intensive supports require flexibility. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is B. The framework provides design guidance that applies across all 3 MTSS tiers. B is correct because Universal Design for Learning provides a framework for designing and implementing interventions across all 3 MTSS tiers, including universal lessons at Tier 1, targeted supports at Tier 2, and individualized interventions at Tier 3. The course material describes this layered relationship directly. A is wrong because the framework is universal and intended for all students. The course material is explicit that it is not limited to special education. C is wrong because the framework complements MTSS rather than replacing it. The two work together to support student learning. D is wrong because the framework applies at every tier of MTSS, not only at Tier 3. Restricting it to one tier misrepresents how it is meant to function. Universal Design for Learning and multi-tiered systems of support are 2 distinct frameworks that work best when used together. Understanding how they complement each other, and why neither replaces the other, is essential for designing truly inclusive schools. UDL tells educators how to design instruction, so it's accessible from the start. The tiered system tells educators how intensively to support each student. Neither framework does the other's job, but together they cover both dimensions at once. UDL doesn't stop at Tier 1. At Tier 2, intervention groups use flexible materials and choice points. At Tier 3, individualized plans incorporate student strengths, preferred input modes, and interests. UDL shapes the design at every level of the pyramid. Without UDL, the tiered system simply delivers more of the same instruction, which rarely solves underlying access problems. Without MTSS, UDL treats every student identically, even when some need greater intensity. A common exam trap is assuming UDL belongs only at Tier 1. It belongs everywhere. When both frameworks operate together across all tiers, schools can be proactive in design and responsive to differing levels of need at the same time. If a STEM describes either framework working in isolation, that's a signal the full integration is missing. Question 28. A teacher attending a workshop learns about an instructional approach that tailors 4 specific elements to student needs: what students learn, how they demonstrate learning, and the setting in which they learn. Which approach is being introduced? Your options are A. Universal screening for academic risk. B. Positive behavioral interventions and supports. C. Co-teaching with a special educator. D. Differentiated instruction organized around content, process, product, and learning environment. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is D. Differentiated instruction organized around content, process, product, and learning environment. D is correct because differentiated instruction is organized around 4 components: content, process, product, and learning environment. The 4 elements named in the workshop describe these exactly. A is wrong because universal screening is an assessment activity for identifying risk. It is not a 4-component instructional approach. B is wrong because positive behavioral interventions and supports focus on behavior, not the 4 components named. They are not what the workshop is introducing. C is wrong because co-teaching is a collaborative delivery model, not a 4-component instructional approach. The components listed match differentiated instruction. Differentiated instruction is a structured approach that lets teachers respond to the varied needs of their students without sacrificing rigor or feasibility. Rather than improvising, teachers use a clear framework developed by Carol Ann Tomlinson in the 1990s. The framework rests on 4 components a teacher can adjust: content, process, product, and learning environment. Together they cover the full instructional experience and give teachers a structured way to think about variation. In practice, a teacher observes variation in her class and selects which components to adjust on a given day. She does not redesign all 4 components for every lesson. She picks the levers most useful for the differences she actually sees. A key exam nuance is that differentiation does not mean every student receives a unique lesson plan. Instead, students are clustered into a small number of pathways. Designing a separate plan for each individual is considered unsustainable and is not true differentiation. Finally, do not confuse differentiated instruction with universal design for learning. UDL builds in flexibility before the teacher knows her specific students. Differentiation responds to variation the teacher has already observed. Both are valuable, but the timing of the design decision is what sets them apart. Question 27. A 6th grade language arts teacher gives students 3 reading selections on the same theme, each written at a different reading level, so each student can engage with the theme at an appropriate level of challenge. Which component of differentiated instruction is the teacher adjusting? Your options are: A. Content, because she is changing what students read to fit their level. B. Process, because she is adjusting how students learn. C. Product, because she is changing how students show learning. D. Learning environment, because she is changing the seating arrangement. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is A. Content, because she is changing what students read to fit their level. A is correct because content differentiation involves altering what students learn or read. Offering 3 reading selections at different levels on the same theme is a direct adjustment of content. B is wrong because process differentiation adjusts how students learn the material, such as group structure or activity type. The teacher is changing the reading itself, not the activity. C is wrong because product differentiation changes how students demonstrate learning. There is no mention of varying the output here. D is wrong because learning environment differentiation involves the physical or emotional setting. The teacher's adjustment here is about reading materials, not seating. Content differentiation means adjusting what students read or learn to match their readiness, interest, or learner profile. It is one of 4 components of differentiated instruction, and the key word is content itself, not the activity or the output. Teachers vary the material along 3 dimensions: a student's readiness level, their interests, and the complexity tier of the text or task. Crucially, the conceptual standard stays the same. Only the specific material used to reach that standard changes. Picture a language arts teacher launching a unit on identity using 3 novels at 3 different reading levels. Every student answers the same analytical questions about identity and character. The texts vary, the standard does not. That is content differentiation in operation. Here is the exam distinction that trips students up. Content differentiation uses a varied text level but holds the standard constant. Modification pairs an easier text with easier questions, which actually lowers the standard. If the conceptual bar drops, it is modification, not differentiation. When a test stem describes a teacher offering tiered readings or varied resources on the same theme, content is the component being adjusted. If the stem describes varying the activity instead of the material, that points to process differentiation, not content. Question 28. A 4th grade math teacher introduces multiplication by giving some students manipulatives to use, allowing others to work in small groups while she pulls a 3rd group for a guided mini lesson. and providing one student with a one-on-one think aloud opportunity. Each group is learning the same multiplication concept. Which component of differentiated instruction is the teacher adjusting? Your options are A. Content, because she is varying what is taught. B. Product, because she is varying student outputs. C. Process, because she is varying how students engage with the material. D. Learning environment, because she is rearranging the classroom. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is C. Process, because she is varying how students engage with the material. C is correct because process differentiation adjusts how students engage with the material, including activity type, grouping, and level of teacher support, varying manipulatives, small groups, mini lessons, and one-on-one think alouds for the same concept is a textbook example. A is wrong because content remains the same. All students are working on multiplication. The teacher is not varying what is being taught. B is wrong because product would mean varying the final output or demonstration. The scenario describes the during instruction process, not the output. D is wrong because while grouping shift, the variation is about activity and support, not the physical or emotional setting of the room. Process differentiation is one of 4 components of differentiated instruction. It means adjusting the during instruction activity, not the content students learn or the final product they produce. The content stays constant, the path through it varies. A teacher differentiating process might have one group using manipulatives, another in a guided discussion, and a third thinking aloud with the teacher, all working on the exact same concept. The activity each student engages in fits how they learn best. Picture a math teacher introducing multiplication. One group uses base 10 blocks. Another has a small group conference with the teacher. A third works on partner practice. And a fourth takes on an independent challenge. Same concept, 4 different processes. The mechanisms of process differentiation include varied grouping arrangements, varied scaffolds, adjusting the level of teacher support across the lesson, and building in flexible time and student choice. Each lever targets how students move through the content, not what the content is. On exams, process differentiation is confused with content or product differentiation, and with Tier 2 intervention. Remember, process is the during instruction activity varying while content and output stay constant. Small group work inside universal instruction is process differentiation. Small group work as a supplemental layer is targeted intervention. Those are not the same thing. Question 29. At the end of a unit on the water cycle, a 3rd grade teacher tells her students they may show what they learned by writing a paragraph, drawing a labeled diagram, building a model with classroom materials, or recording a short oral summary. The content standard is the same for all options. Which component of differentiated instruction is the teacher adjusting? Your options are A. Content, because she is changing what students are learning. B. Product, because she is changing how students demonstrate their learning. C. Process, because she is changing the activity flow. D. Learning environment, because she is reshaping the physical setting. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is B. Product, because she is changing how students demonstrate their learning. B is correct because product differentiation focuses on how students demonstrate their learning, offering written, visual, hands-on, or oral output options for the same standard is a clear example of product variation. A is wrong because content remains the same. Everyone is learning the water cycle. The teacher is not adjusting what is being taught. C is wrong because process is about how students engage during instruction, not how they show learning afterward. The scenario centers on the final output. D is wrong because there is no change to the physical or emotional setting of the room described. Output choice is unrelated to environment. Product differentiation is one of 4 components of differentiated instruction. The key idea is that the final output, how students demonstrate learning, is what varies, while the content standard stays exactly the same. A teacher practicing product differentiation might offer students a choice: write a paragraph, draw a labeled diagram, or record an oral summary. Each option targets the same content standard, only the format of the final output changes. The reason this matters is that the form of an output is not the same as the depth of knowledge behind it. Students who know the material may underperform because of the format itself, not because of weak understanding. Varied options separate content mastery from format ability. The most important exam distinction is between differentiation and modification. Modification lowers the content standard. Product differentiation holds the standard constant. A student who builds a detailed diorama of the water cycle demonstrates the same depth of understanding as one who writes an essay. Shared rubrics built around content and reasoning, not format-specific skills, preserve rigor across all output types. When a STEM describes choice in how to demonstrate learning while the standard stays steady, product differentiation is the answer. Question 30. A teacher noticed that some students focus best at a quiet desk, others when seated on a stability ball, and others when working in a beanbag corner with low lighting. She rearranges her classroom to include all 3 options and lets students choose where to work. Which component of differentiated instruction is she adjusting? Your options are: A. Learning environment, because she is adjusting the physical and emotional setting. B. Content, because she is changing what students learn. C. Product, because she is changing how students demonstrate learning. D. Process, because she is changing instructional activities. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is A. Learning environment, because she is adjusting the physical and emotional setting. A is correct because learning environment differentiation pertains to the physical and emotional context of learning, including seating, lighting, and noise level. Offering desk, stability ball, and beanbag options is a direct adjustment of the learning environment. B is wrong because content is what students are learning. The teacher has not changed the material being taught. C is wrong because product is how students demonstrate learning. The teacher has not specified varied output formats here. D is wrong because process is how students engage with material during instruction. The change being made is about physical setting, not activity type. Learning environment differentiation means adjusting the physical and emotional context in which students learn. It is one of 4 core components of differentiated instruction, and it carries the same weight as content, process, and product. The 4 components are content, process, product, and environment. What makes learning environment distinct is that the setting itself is the variable. That's associated, not the materials, the activity, or the final output. Those can remain identical for every student while the environment shifts. In practice, a teacher might offer a quiet desk row, a beanbag corner, stability balls for students who concentrate better with body movement, and a standing desk, all within the same room. Students choose the setting that helps them focus best. Learning environment covers both physical and emotional design. That means flexible seating, varied lighting, intentional noise zones, and an emotional climate built on predictable routines and visible affirmations, because a space with great furniture but a hostile atmosphere is not fully differentiated. On the exam, environment is sometimes presented as a frill. The framework treats it as essential. A student who cannot focus in a noisy, Fluorescent lit room will struggle regardless of how strong the content or activity is. The setting determines whether the work can happen at all. Question 31. A first grade reading teacher uses a teacher-centered approach to introduce a new phonics rule. She models the rule out loud, leads students through guided practice, and then assigns independent practice, all in a clearly sequenced format. Which approach is the teacher using? Your options are A. Norm reference grading, B. Multiple means of engagement, C. Direct instruction with clear modeling, guided practice, and independent practice, D. Alternative co-teaching for a small group. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is C. Direct instruction with clear modeling, guided practice, and independent practice. C is correct because direct instruction is a teacher-centered approach that explicitly teaches a specific skill through modeling, guided practice, and independent practice, typically following a clearly sequenced format. The teacher's sequence matches that definition precisely. A is wrong because norm reference grading is an assessment ranking practice. It has nothing to do with the instructional sequence the teacher is using. B is wrong because multiple means of engagement is one of the UDL principles. It is not the structured modeling and practice format described. D is wrong because alternative co-teaching pairs two teachers to deliver reteaching or enrichment for a small group. The scenario describes one teacher leading a sequenced lesson. Direct instruction is a teacher-centered approach built on explicit structured guidance. Rather than letting students discover concepts on their own, the teacher leads a carefully sequenced lesson, especially useful for foundational skills like phonics and basic math. The approach follows a predictable sequence sometimes called the gradual release of responsibility. The teacher first models the skill, then guides students through practice with feedback, and finally releases students to apply the skill independently. Direct instruction is often confused with explicit instruction and systematic instruction. Direct instruction emphasizes teacher-centered scripted delivery. Explicit instruction emphasizes clarity and stated objectives. Systematic instruction emphasizes sequencing skills from simple to complex. These three overlap significantly but have distinct emphases. When reading an exam stem, certain signal words flag direct instruction. Modeling, guided practice, independent practice, and gradual release of responsibility all point toward it. Discovery, exploration, and student-led inquiry point away from it. Direct instruction is not outdated. Research consistently shows it produces strong outcomes for foundational skills, especially early reading and math. When a skill requires precision and structured guidance, direct instruction belongs in the teacher's toolkit. Question 32. A math teacher plans an addition unit by first teaching single-digit addition, then double-digit addition with regrouping, then multi-step word problems. Each new step builds on the one before it, and each skill is broken down into smaller sub-steps before the class advances. Which instructional approach is the teacher using? Your options are A. Co-teaching alternative model, B. Token economy reinforcement, C. A behavior matrix posted on the wall, D. Systematic instruction that builds skills in a logical sequence. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is D. Systematic instruction that builds skills in a logical sequence. D is correct because systematic instruction is a methodical approach that breaks down complex skills into smaller, manageable steps and teaches them in a logical sequence with gradually increasing complexity. The single-digit, then double-digit, then multi-step word problem sequence is the textbook example. A is wrong because an alternative co-teaching model pairs two teachers. The scenario describes one teacher's sequencing decisions, not a co-teaching arrangement. B is wrong because a token economy is a behavioral reinforcement system. It is not the instructional sequencing approach being described. C is wrong because a behavior matrix is a classroom management tool that lists behavior expectations. It does not describe how academic content is sequenced. Systematic instruction is a methodical approach to teaching that hinges on one core idea. Skills must be taught in a deliberate sequence, moving from simple to complex. It's not just about teaching clearly, it's about teaching in the right order. The approach involves 4 deliberate moves, mapping out the full sequence of skills, breaking each into manageable sub-steps, teaching them in order, and checking for mastery before moving on. Each element ensures no gaps are left behind. Picture a 4th grade teacher in Pittsburgh planning a math unit. She starts with single-digit addition, moves to double-digit without regrouping. Then with regrouping, broken into sub-step, and finally to multi-step word problems. Each level depends on the one below it. A common exam trap is confusing systematic instruction with direct or explicit instruction. Systematic instruction emphasizes sequencing. Direct instruction emphasizes teacher-centered delivery. Explicit instruction emphasizes clarity. The 3 often appear together, but the distinguishing feature of systematic instruction is always the deliberate ordering of skills. Whenever a scenario describes a teacher ordering skills from simple to complex and confirming mastery at each step, systematic instruction is the approach in use. Sequence is the signal. Question 33. A reading teacher tells her students at the start of a lesson exactly what they will learn, demonstrates each reading comprehension strategy step by step, provides guided practice with feedback, and then has students apply the strategy independently. The whole approach is highly structured and transparent about each step. Which approach is the teacher using? Your options are A. A reward system with tangible incentives. B. Explicit instruction that clearly states objectives and models steps. So, universal screening for early identification. D. Cooperative learning groups built on peer-led discovery. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is B. Explicit instruction that clearly states objectives and models steps. B is correct because explicit instruction is a highly structured teaching approach that states learning objectives clearly, provides direct explanations and demonstrations, and offers guided and independent practice. The teacher's transparent step-by-step structure matches the definition. A is wrong because a reward system is a behavior reinforcement strategy. It does not describe the instructional structure being used. C is wrong because universal screening is an assessment activity that identifies students for support. It is not a teaching method. D is wrong because cooperative learning relies on peer-led discovery. Explicit instruction is teacher-led and structured. The 2 approaches sit at opposite ends of the spectrum. Explicit instruction is a highly structured teaching approach built on one defining feature: transparency. Students know exactly what they are expected to learn, see the skill clearly modeled, and practice it with feedback before working independently. The teacher opens by stating the objective, then breaks the skill into observable steps and models her reasoning aloud. Guided practice with feedback follows, and students finish by applying the skill independently. Picture a 5th grade teacher in Tampa teaching summarizing. She states the objective, defines the strategy, models it by thinking aloud, leads guided practice with feedback, and closes with independent work. That transparent sequence is explicit instruction in operation. Explicit instruction is often confused with direct or systematic instruction. Explicit emphasizes clarity and transparency of the teaching. Direct emphasizes teacher-centered delivery. Systematic emphasizes skill sequencing. On an exam, identify which feature the scenario foregrounds. A common mistake is assuming explicit instruction reduces student thinking. It does the opposite. By making cognitive steps visible, it gives students a model they can internalize and adapt far more effectively than implicit alternatives. Question 34. In a co-taught 5th grade classroom, the general education teacher leads the math lesson while the special education teacher sits to the side, recording student responses, watching for which students struggle with a new concept, and gathering data to inform tomorrow's small group plan. Which co-teaching model are they using? Your options are A. One teach, one observe, where one teacher instructs and the other collects observational data. B. Station teaching, where students rotate among learning centers. C. Team teaching, where both teachers actively share the lesson delivery. D. Alternative teaching, where one teacher reteaches a small group. Take a second, which answer would you pick? The correct answer is A. One teach, one observe, where one teacher instructs and the other collects observational data. A is correct because the one teach, one observe model has one teacher delivering instruction while the other observes student learning, gathers data, or assesses progress. The scenario describes this arrangement exactly. B is wrong because station teaching divides the classroom into stations or learning centers led by different teachers, with students rotating among them. The scenario shows no rotational stations. C is wrong because team teaching has both teachers actively engaged in instruction and sharing responsibility for delivery. Only one teacher is teaching in the scenario. D is wrong because alternative teaching has one teacher instructing most of the class while the other reteaches or enriches a smaller group. The second teacher is not teaching anyone here. Co-teaching, as defined by Marilyn Friend, pairs a general and special education teacher to share responsibility for an inclusive classroom. One of Friend's 6 co-teaching models is one teach, one observe, the most data-focused of them all. The two teachers first plan together to identify what data to collect. Then one teacher leads instruction while the other sits to the side, watching and recording, tracking participation, time on task, errors, and student responses. Notice that the observing teacher has no interaction with students during the lesson. Her full attention goes to documenting what she sees. Data a teacher actively leading a lesson simply cannot collect at the same time. The key exam distinction is between one teach, one observe, and one teach, one assist. In observe, the secondary teacher gathers data without engaging students. In assist, the secondary teacher moves around the room actively supporting individuals. Students often lose points by assuming the observing teacher is doing nothing. In reality, skilled observation produces data no busy lead teacher could collect alone. The observing teacher contributes through what she records, not through visible activity. Question 35. 2 co-teachers in a 3rd grade classroom split the class into 2 equal groups. Each teacher works simultaneously with one group, teaching the same lesson at the same time so they can provide more individualized attention and respond to questions more quickly. Which co-teaching model are they using? Your options are alternative teaching with one small group being retaught. B. Team teaching with both teachers sharing the same audience. C. One teach, one assist with one teacher supporting individuals. D. Parallel teaching where each teacher works with one of 2 equal groups. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is D. Parallel teaching where each teacher works with one of 2 equal groups. D is correct because parallel teaching divides the class into 2 groups, with each teacher working simultaneously with one group on the same content to provide more differentiated attention. Splitting the class in half and teaching the same lesson in parallel is the defining pattern. A is wrong because alternative teaching has one teacher with most of the class and the other with a smaller group, not two equal groups. The scenario describes equal groups. B is wrong because team teaching has both teachers in front of the whole class at once. The teachers here have split the class into separate groups. C is wrong because one assist has one teacher leading and the other supporting individuals across the room. There are two parallel groups in the scenario, not one whole class delivery. Parallel teaching is one of 6 co-teaching models developed by Marilyn Friend. Understanding what makes it distinct from other models is key to applying it correctly on the exam. In parallel teaching, the class splits into 2 roughly equal halves, and each teacher leads one group through the same lesson simultaneously. The power of the model comes from that smaller group size. Fewer students means more chances to participate, faster responses to confusion, and richer engagement overall. Picture a classroom where both teachers work at the same time, each with half the students. Both groups receive the same lesson content. The difference is the delivery environment, not the curriculum. Parallel teaching is often confused with station teaching and alternative teaching. Station teaching has students rotating through centers with different content. Alternative teaching uses one large group and one small group, typically for reteaching or enrichment. Parallel teaching is unique because both groups are equal in size and receive the same content. When an exam item describes a class split in half, with each teacher guiding one group through identical material at the same time, that is parallel teaching. If the groups are unequal, or if the content differs between groups, it is a different model entirely. Question 36. A school adopts a proactive approach to behavior that emphasizes teaching and reinforcing positive behaviors rather than focusing primarily on punishment for negative ones. The approach aims to cultivate a positive school climate and improve student outcomes. Which initiative is the school adopting? Your options are A zero tolerance discipline policy, B, a norm reference behavior ranking, C, positive behavioral interventions and supports, D, an exclusionary suspension framework. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is C, positive behavioral interventions and supports. C is correct because positive behavioral interventions and supports take a proactive approach that teaches and reinforces positive behaviors to build a positive school climate. The course material highlights this proactive emphasis over punishment. A is wrong because a zero tolerance policy is purely punitive and reactive. It is the opposite of the proactive teaching and reinforcement approach described. B is wrong because a behavior ranking system compares students to each other and does not align with the teaching and reinforcement focus of the strategy described. D is wrong because an exclusionary suspension framework removes students from the classroom and does not address positive behavior teaching at all. Positive behavioral interventions and supports is a proactive, school-wide framework built on a simple premise: behavior is learned. Just like reading or math, and it can be taught using the same instructional principles. Rather than waiting for misbehavior and punishing it, PBIS schools explicitly teach a small set of expectations, reinforce students who meet them, collect referral data to spot problem areas, and pair any consequences with reteaching the expected behavior. A behavior matrix makes the expectations concrete. It shows every student and adult exactly what being respectful, responsible, and safe looks like in each specific setting: classroom, hallway, lunchroom, and playground. Traditional punishment-only systems remove students from learning without giving them the skills to behave differently when they return. The cycle simply repeats, producing worse academic outcomes and a negative school climate. PBIS is not permissive. A student who behaves dangerously still faces consequences. The framework's distinction is that consequences are always paired with proactive teaching, not that consequences disappear. Question 37. A teacher creates a chart that lists specific behaviors expected in different classroom settings, including whole group instruction, independent work, and group activities, along with the positive reinforcement strategies the teacher will use when students demonstrate those behaviors. Which PBIS tool is the teacher using? Your options are A check-in and check-out daily feedback log. B, a behavior matrix that maps expected behaviors to reinforcement strategies. C, a reward catalog for token redemption. D, a social skills lesson plan for direct instruction. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is B, a behavior matrix that maps expected behaviors to reinforcement strategies. B is correct because a behavior matrix maps the specific behaviors expected in various classroom settings to the corresponding reinforcement strategies, serving as a visual guide for students and teachers. The chart described matches the definition directly. A is wrong because a check-in and check-out log gives a student daily behavioral feedback from a staff member. It is not the multi-setting behavior chart described. C is wrong because a reward catalog lists items students can earn through tokens. It is not the matrix that connects behaviors to reinforcements across settings. D is wrong because a social skills lesson plan teaches specific skills like communication. It is not the visual chart of behavior expectations described. A behavior matrix is one of the foundational tools of positive behavioral interventions and supports. It solves a problem that trips up even well-meaning schools. Abstract expectations leave students guessing about what good behavior actually looks like in each place they spend time. The matrix puts expectations on one axis and settings on the other. Every cell names the specific behavior students should show in that place. So respectful in the hallway means walking quietly and keeping hands to yourself, not just a vague instruction to behave. The matrix works for 3 reasons. It gives explicit examples, it ties behavior to specific settings, and it creates shared understanding between students and staff. When everyone agrees on what responsible looks like in the lunchroom, confusion drops and consistency rises. The matrix is the curriculum for behavior teaching, not a decoration. Teachers must explicitly teach, model, and reinforce the behaviors listed in each cell. A matrix posted on the wall but never referenced in practice does not produce behavior change. Active use is what makes it work. Question 38. A second grade teacher implements a classroom system in which students earn tokens for displaying classroom expectations such as raising hands, using kind words, and helping classmates. Students can later exchange the tokens for privileges such as extra recess minutes or choice of a class activity. Which PBIS strategy is the teacher using? Your options are A formal special education evaluation, B, universal screening for behavior, C, a check-in and check-out morning routine, D, a token economy reward system that reinforces desired behaviors. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is D, a token economy reward system that reinforces desired behaviors. D is correct because a token economy reward system has students earn tokens for demonstrating desired behaviors, with the tokens later exchanged for privileges or rewards. The course material lists this as a common PBIS reward system. It is wrong because a special education evaluation is a formal eligibility process, not a daily reinforcement system in the classroom. B is wrong because universal screening identifies students who may need additional support. It does not deliver behavior reinforcement. C is wrong because a check-in and check-out routine gives a student daily feedback from a staff member. It is not the token-based reward system described. A token economy is a reinforcement strategy where students earn tokens for desired behaviors and later exchange them for rewards. Understanding why this works and how it fits into a broader system is what this theory section is about. The defining feature is the indirect link between behavior and reward. A token is given immediately after the desired behavior, then exchanged later for a reward from a menu of options. That immediate token preserves the reinforcement effect even though the actual reward comes later. In practice, a teacher distributes tokens consistently whenever students demonstrate expected behaviors, often naming the behavior aloud. Students accumulate tokens in a personal container, then trade them at a designated exchange point for items on a posted reward menu. A token economy is not bribery. Bribery rewards someone for stopping an undesirable behavior, while a token economy rewards demonstrating a desirable one. It is also just one strategy within positive behavioral interventions and supports, not the entire framework. The power of a token economy comes from immediate reinforcement bridging the gap to a delayed reward. Used thoughtfully within a broader support system, it is an effective and flexible behavior strategy. Question 39. A middle schooler who needs extra guidance to meet behavior expectations meets with a designated staff mentor each morning to set a behavior goal for the day, and then meets with the same staff member at the end of the day to review how the day went and earn feedback. Which PBIS support is the school using? Your options are A check-in and check-out system providing daily behavior feedback from a designated staff member. B. Universal screening for the whole student body. C. An alternative co-teaching model for academic content. D. A school-wide behavior matrix posted on the wall. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is A. A check-in and check-out system providing daily behavior feedback from a designated staff member. Is correct because a check-in and check-out system has students receive daily feedback on their behavior from a designated staff member, typically at Tier 2 or Tier 3. The morning goal setting and end-of-day review is the textbook routine. B is wrong because universal screening is an academic and behavior identification practice for the whole school. It does not provide the one-on-one daily mentor relationship described. C is wrong because alternative co-teaching is an academic delivery model, not a behavior support system. It does not involve a daily mentor check-in. D is wrong because a behavior matrix lists expectations but does not deliver the personalized daily feedback the student is receiving. Check-in and check-out is a structured behavioral support strategy built around a daily relationship between a student and a designated adult. It sits at Tier 2 or 3 of positive behavioral interventions and supports, serving students who need more than the school-wide system alone provides. Each day follows 3 phases: a morning check-in to set a behavioral goal, a feedback form that travels with the student to every class, and an end-of-day review to celebrate successes and plan for tomorrow. The family receives the form each evening. The feedback form is the thread that connects each part of the day, but the mechanism that makes the strategy effective is the consistent, caring relationship with a designated adult who notices the student every single morning and afternoon. 3 features define the strategy: the daily structured routine, the designated adult who commits to consistent contact, and the feedback form. Informal encouragement from a teacher or a school-wide behavior expectation without these elements does not constitute check-in and check-out. Remember, the feedback form gives structure to the contact, but research consistently shows it is the trusted adult relationship that drives student outcomes. When an exam item emphasizes only the form and ignores the relationship, the complete answer recognizes both as essential. Question 40. A fourth grade teacher dedicates time every week to teaching students how to communicate clearly, solve interpersonal problems, and resolve conflicts respectfully. The aim is to equip students with the skills needed to handle social situations effectively and to prevent behavior problems before they arise. Which PBIS strategy is the teacher using? Your options are A. Universal academic screening, B. A reward catalog for redemption, C. Social skills instruction integrated into the curriculum, D. An alternative co-teaching model. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is C. Social skills instruction integrated into the curriculum. C is correct because social skills instruction teaches essential skills such as communication, problem solving, and conflict resolution to help prevent behavior problems. The course material identifies it as a proactive PBIS strategy. A is wrong because universal academic screening identifies students for support but does not teach social skills. B is wrong because A reward catalog lists items earned through tokens. It is not the direct teaching of social skills described. D is wrong because an alternative co-teaching model is an academic delivery arrangement between two teachers, not the social skills curriculum described. Social skills instruction is the explicit teaching of skills like communication, conflict resolution, problem solving, and emotional regulation as part of the classroom curriculum. The core insight is simple. Social skills are not innate. They are learned just like reading. The teacher identifies a target skill, breaks it into observable steps, models it, and gives students structured practice opportunities. Feedback, reinforcement, and integration into daily routines keep practice going beyond the dedicated lesson. When students lack social skills, the resulting behavior can look like misconduct, but it actually reflects a skill deficit. Punishing the behavior without teaching the missing skill does not produce lasting change. Teaching the skill does. A common exam trap is confusing social skills instruction with related strategies. Classroom management addresses routines and expectations, not specific skill teaching. Character education focuses on values. Social emotional learning is broader. Social skills instruction is a specific, observable subset of it. When an exam stem describes a teacher explicitly introducing a skill, modeling it, and providing structured practice with feedback, that is social skills instruction. General behavior rules or character posters alone are not enough. Look for the deliberate, skill-focused teaching cycle. Question 41. A federal law guarantees a free and appropriate public education for eligible children with disabilities aged 3 through 21. It governs the development of individualized education programs and requires parental consent for evaluations. Re-evaluation every 3 years, and placement in the least restrictive environment. Which law is being described? Your options are A. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. B. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. C. Title 3 of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. D. The Every Student Succeeds Act. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is B. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. B is correct because the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act guarantees free and appropriate public education for eligible children with disabilities, governs the individualized education program process, and requires parental consent along with triennial re-evaluation. The least restrictive environment principle is one of its defining features. A is wrong because Section 504 is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination but does not establish the individualized education program process or the triennial evaluation rule. Its scope and instruments differ. C is wrong because Title III provides funding to support English learners' language acquisition. It does not govern special education services or individualized education programs. D is wrong because the Every Student Succeeds Act addresses broader K through 12 accountability and English learner provisions, but it does not establish individualized education programs or the special education process described. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act guarantees a free and appropriate public education to eligible students with disabilities from age 3 through 21. Understanding its core principles, and how it differs from other laws is essential for the exam. The law is built on 5 core principles: a free and appropriate public education, placement in the least restrictive environment alongside peers, required parental consent, re-evaluation every 3 years, and procedural safeguards that give families due process rights when they disagree with school decisions. A common exam trap is confusing IDEA with Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. IDEA requires specialized instruction and creates an individualized education program. Section 504 is a civil rights law that provides accommodations for equal access but does not mandate specialized instruction. The defining signal for IDEA is specialized instruction. Eligibility under IDEA is not automatic. A student must fall into one of 13 specific disability categories, and the disability must require specialized instruction. Once eligibility is confirmed, the team develops an individualized education program tailored to that student's unique needs. When an exam item describes a student receiving specialized instruction designed around individual needs, IDEA applies. When the student needs only accommodations for equal access, look to a different law. Eligibility requires a qualifying disability category. General learning struggles alone are not enough. Question 40 asks, a second grade student is being evaluated for special education services. The team confirms that the student has one of the specific disabilities listed under federal special education law, and that the disability adversely affects educational performance and requires specialized instruction. Which support plan is the team most likely preparing? Your options are A behavioral contract managed by classroom teachers only. B, a Title III English language acquisition plan. C, a district level wellness intervention plan. D, an individualized education program under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is D, an individualized education program under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. D is correct because an individualized education program is required when a student has one of the specific disabilities listed under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and the disability adversely affects educational performance, requiring specialized instruction. The team's findings match the eligibility criteria directly. A is wrong because a behavior contract is a classroom level management tool. It does not provide the federally required specialized instruction described. B is wrong because a Title III plan supports English language acquisition for English learners. It is not the specialized instruction plan for a disability described. C is wrong because a district wellness plan is not a recognized plan tied to the specific disability criteria. It does not deliver federally required specialized instruction. An individualized education program is the legal document mandating specialized instruction and services for students with qualifying disabilities under federal law. Understanding exactly what makes a student eligible and what sets an IEP apart from other plans is essential for the exam. Eligibility has 2 distinct gates. The student must have one of the 13 federally defined disability categories, such as specific learning disability, autism, or intellectual disability, and that disability must adversely affect educational performance and require specialized instruction. Meeting only one condition is not enough. Federal law specifies what every IEP must contain: a statement of the student's present levels of performance, measurable annual goals, the special education and related services to be provided including their frequency and location, how progress will be measured, how the student participates in assessments, and any necessary accommodations. The critical exam distinction is this: an IEP requires specialized instruction, not just accommodations. A student who needs only accommodations may qualify for a different plan entirely. If specialized instruction is absent, there is no IEP, regardless of how many accommodations are listed. When an exam item describes a student with a disability, ask two questions. Does the student have a federally recognized disability category? And does that disability require specialized instruction? Both must be true. Accommodations alone never equal an IEP. Question 4.3. A high schooler has a diagnosed physical impairment that substantially limits a major life activity but does not require specialized instruction. She can access the general education curriculum with classroom accommodations such as extended time on test and a designated quiet workspace. Which plan best matches her needs under federal law? Your options are A 504 plan that provides accommodations to ensure equal access. B, an individualized education program under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. C, a Title III English language plan. D, a school-level behavior intervention plan. Before I reveal it, which one do you think is right? The correct answer is A, a 504 plan that provides accommodations to ensure equal access. A is correct because a 504 plan provides accommodations and supports to remove barriers to learning for students with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity without requiring specialized instruction. Extended time and a quiet workspace are exactly the kind of accommodations the plan delivers. B is wrong because an individualized education program is for students whose disability requires specialized instruction, not only accommodations. The student does not require specialized instruction here. C is wrong because a Title III plan supports English learners. The student's needs in this scenario are unrelated to language acquisition. D is wrong because a behavior intervention plan is targeted at specific behavior concerns. The student needs access accommodations, not behavior management. A 504 plan is a civil rights document, not a special education plan. It comes from Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which prohibits disability-based discrimination in any program receiving federal funding. Its entire purpose is equal access, removing barriers so students with disabilities can reach the same curriculum as their peers. To qualify, a student must have an impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. So, things like learning, concentrating, reading, or walking. Crucially, the disability does not need to fall within the 13 categories required for special education eligibility. In practice, a 504 plan documents specific accommodations, extended time on tests, a quiet workspace, accessible seating, or assistive technology. These change how a student accesses the curriculum, not what the student is expected to learn. The most tested distinction is the difference between a 504 plan and an IEP. A 504 plan operates under civil rights law and provides accommodations only. An IEP operates under special education law and delivers specialized instruction. A student can qualify for one without qualifying for the other. When an exam stem describes a student who needs accommodations to access the general curriculum but does not require specialized instruction, the 504 plan is the correct answer. If specialized instruction is needed, a different plan applies. Question 44. A sixth grader with a learning disability is given access to an audio version of his social studies textbook and extra time on assessments, while still being expected to learn the same content as his peers. A classmate, however, is given shortened reading passages and a simplified version of the test with fewer answer choices, because the curriculum itself has been adjusted to her cognitive level, which best describes the distinction between the two student supports. Your options are: A. Both students are receiving identical accommodations. B. Both students are receiving identical modifications. C. The first student is receiving accommodations and the second is receiving modifications. D. The first student is receiving modifications and the second is receiving accommodations. What's your answer? Commit to one before I continue. The correct answer is C. The first student is receiving accommodations and the second is receiving modifications. C is correct because accommodations help students access the same learning materials and complete the same assignments as their peers without altering what is being learned. Modifications change the content or skills students are expected to master. Audio textbooks and extra time fit accommodations, simplified content, and fewer answer choices fit modifications. A is wrong because the two students are not receiving the same kind of support. Accommodations and modifications differ in whether the content itself changes. B is wrong because they are not both modifications. The first student is still learning the standard curriculum, which is the test for an accommodation. D is wrong because the roles are reversed in this option. The student with audio textbooks is being accommodated, not modified, and the student with simplified content is being modified. In special education, two types of adjustments are made for students with disabilities: accommodations and modifications. They sound similar, but they operate at completely different levels of the curriculum. Accommodations change how a student accesses or demonstrates learning. The standard stays the same. Modifications change what the student is expected to learn, reducing the depth, complexity, or quantity of content. The standard itself is adjusted. Accommodations include things like extended time on tests and audio versions of textbooks. The content is unchanged. Modifications include shortened reading passages and simplified questions that reduce the complexity of what the student must master. Consider two sixth graders. The first receives audio textbooks and extra time. He is still held to grade level standards. That is an accommodation. The second receives shortened passages and simplified questions. Her expected content has changed. That is a modification. The defining test is always whether what the student must learn has changed. Accommodations preserve high expectations by removing access barriers. Modifications lower the expected standard to match the student's level. Neither is better. Each fits a different need. Use accommodations whenever possible, and reserve modifications for students who genuinely cannot access grade level content, even with strong supports. Question 45. A new teacher is reviewing two student plans. The first plan provides accommodations under civil rights law, focuses on equal access in the general education classroom, and is implemented mainly by the general education teacher. The second plan provides specialized instruction tailored to the student's unique needs, includes measurable annual goals, and is developed by a team of educators, specialists, and parents. Which plans is the teacher reviewing? Your options are: A. Both plans are individualized education programs. B. The first plan is a 504 plan and the second is an individualized education program. C. Both plans are 504 plans because both provide supports. D. The first plan is an individualized education program and the second is a 504 plan. Pick one. Trust your gut. Here's your chance to test yourself. The correct answer is B. The first plan is a 504 plan and the second is an individualized education program. B is correct because a 504 plan provides accommodations to ensure equal access under civil rights law and is generally implemented by the general education teacher. An individualized education program provides specialized instruction with measurable goals, developed by a team of educators, specialists, and parents. The descriptions map directly to those two plans. A is wrong because an individualized education program includes specialized instruction tailored to unique needs. The first plan focuses on accommodations only, which is the hallmark of a 504 plan. C is wrong because a 504 plan does not include the specialized instruction or annual goal setting the second plan describes. The two plans are distinct documents. D is wrong because the descriptions are reversed in this option. Specialized instruction with measurable goals belongs to the individualized education program, not the 504 plan. Both IEPs and 504 plans support students with disabilities, but they are implemented very differently because they serve fundamentally different purposes under different federal laws. An IEP delivers specialized instruction under special education law through a large multidisciplinary team, while a 504 plan delivers accommodations that ensure equal access under civil rights law, typically through a smaller team led by the general education teacher. The IEP requires a full multidisciplinary team, including a special education teacher, related service providers, an administrator, and the family, who together develop measurable annual goals and coordinate specialized services like pull-out or push-in instruction. A 504 plan involves a much smaller team and places responsibility for delivery on the general education teacher. Typical accommodations include extended time, preferential seating, or access to notes. No specialized instruction or annual goals are required. When a test item describes a plan delivered by a special educator with a full team and annual goals, that is an IEP. When accommodations are delivered by the classroom teacher with a small team, that is a 504 plan. The implementation always reflects the underlying legal purpose. Question 46. A federal law provides funding to help English learners attain English proficiency, meet academic standards, build educator capacity for serving English learners, support English-only readiness, and engage parents and communities. Which federal law is being described? Your options are A. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, B. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, C. A state-only school finance formula, D. Title III of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. Which would you go with? Lock it in before the reveal. The correct answer is D. Title III of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. D is correct because Title III of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act provides federal funding to help English learners attain English proficiency, meet academic standards, build educator capacity, prepare students for English-only settings, and promote parental and community engagement. The course material lists each of those purposes directly. A is wrong because the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act addresses special education for students with disabilities. It does not provide the English learner funding described. B is wrong because Section 504 is a civil rights law that addresses access for students with disabilities. It is not the English learner funding statute. C is wrong because a state-only formula is not the federal law described. Title III specifically operates at the federal level. Title III of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act provides dedicated federal funding to help English learners develop English proficiency and meet academic standards. It was updated under No Child Left Behind and continues under the Every Student Succeeds Act. The law identifies 5 core purposes: helping students attain English proficiency, aligning instruction with academic standards, building educator capacity through professional development, reducing barriers to English-only settings, and promoting parental and community engagement through outreach and family literacy services. The law operates through a grant mechanism. Federal funds flow to states, which then distribute money to districts based on how many English learners they enroll. Those funds support language instruction programs, professional development, and family engagement activities at the local level. Title III is frequently confused with other federal laws. It targets language acquisition for English learners specifically, not disability services under IDEA, not impairment accommodations under Section 504, and not the broader accountability framework of ESSA. A student can receive support under more than one law simultaneously. When an exam item describes federal support specifically for English learners' language acquisition and academic success, Title III is in play. When the focus shifts to disabilities or general education funding, look to a different law. Question 47. A district enrollment coordinator is preparing a presentation that defines a group of students as individuals learning English as a second or third language who may have varying levels of English proficiency and additional support needs to access the curriculum. Which group is the coordinator describing? Your options are A. English learners, B. Students with individualized education programs, C. Students with 504 plans, D. Gifted and talented students. Don't overthink it. Which one feels right? The correct answer is A. English learners. A is correct because English learners are individuals learning English as a second or third language who have varying levels of English proficiency and may need additional support to access the curriculum. The description matches the term directly. B is wrong because students with individualized education programs are defined by qualifying disabilities under federal special education law. Language acquisition is not the primary qualifier here. C is wrong because students with 504 plans are defined by impairment that limits a major life activity. They are not defined by language background. D is wrong because gifted and talented students are identified by exceptional ability or achievement, not by English language acquisition. The term English learner has a precise meaning in education, and it's easy to confuse with related but distinct concepts. Let's look at what the term actually means, how students are identified, and what makes the status temporary by design. An English learner is a student whose primary home language is not English and whose English proficiency falls below what academic tasks require. The key idea is that this is a functional description of where a student is developmentally, not a fixed identity. Once a student reaches proficient levels across all language domains, they exit English learner status. Identification begins at enrollment with a home language survey. If a language other than English is spoken at home, the school administers a proficiency assessment. Students scoring below proficient are classified as English learners and receive language support. Annual assessments track growth, and students who reach proficiency across all domains are reclassified. A critical exam distinction, English learner status is determined by English proficiency level relative to academic demands, not by country of origin or immigration status. Some English learners were born in the United States. Some immigrants are fully proficient in English. The home language and the student's proficiency score are what matter. The most tested nuance is that English learner status is transitional, not permanent. Students move through it as they develop proficiency. When an exam item presents EL status as a fixed category, the correct answer will recognize it as a developmental phase with a defined exit point. Question 48. A 5th grade teacher who wants to support an English learner in her science class plans to use images and diagrams alongside text. Simplify her language and avoid idioms. Break the lesson into manageable chunks that build on prior knowledge. And pair the student with a peer for cooperative learning. Which set of classroom strategies for English learners is the teacher applying? Your options are A. Universal screening assessments only. B. Visual supports, simplified language, scaffolding, and peer collaboration. C. Modifications that change the science content the student is expected to learn. D. A 504 plan to address a physical impairment. Got a guess? Lock it in. The correct answer is B. Visual supports, simplified language, scaffolding, and peer collaboration. B is correct because visual supports, simplified language, scaffolding, and peer collaboration are named in the course material as classroom strategies for supporting English learners. The teacher is applying 4 of them at once. A is wrong because universal screening is an assessment activity for identifying need. The teacher's actions go far beyond screening into actual classroom strategies. C is wrong because modifications change what is being learned, but the teacher is keeping the science content the same while changing how it is accessed. That is accommodation and English learner support, not modification. D is wrong because a 504 plan addresses impairments that limit major life activities. The student in the scenario needs language support, not a 504 plan. When a classroom includes English learners, teachers face a specific challenge. Students must acquire English and master grade level content at the same time. The strategies we're about to explore address both demands without lowering academic standards. Teachers draw on a coordinated set of practices: visual supports, scaffolding, simplified language, peer collaboration, language modeling, and bilingual resources, among others. Together, these strategies make content accessible while keeping the academic standard intact. Picture a science teacher introducing the water cycle. She displays images beside vocabulary, breaks the lesson into chunks, pairs the English learner with a peer, and offers a bilingual glossary. None of these moves changes what is being taught. They change how it is made accessible. A key exam distinction: EL strategies are general instructional practices, not legal accommodations under a 504 plan, and not modifications that lower the content standard. Exam items often mix these 3 options together and ask which one is actually being described. Finally, these strategies are designed to work within the standard curriculum, not replace it. A separate curriculum for English learners is rarely appropriate. The goal is inclusion with support, keeping every student on track academically while language proficiency develops. Question 49. A district team is evaluating a 3rd grader who is an English learner and who has been struggling with reading. The team wants to determine whether his struggles are due to limited English proficiency, a learning disability, or both. Which guideline best reflects best practice for this evaluation? Your options are: A. Identify the student as disabled if he scores below grade level in English reading. B. Skip the evaluation because language background overrides disability identification. C. Use assessments in the student's home language when appropriate and avoid identifying a disability based solely on limited English proficiency. D. Refer the student directly to special education without further assessment. Which one is it? Pause the video if you need more time. The correct answer is C. Use assessments in the student's home language when appropriate and avoid identifying a disability based solely on limited English proficiency. C is correct because best practice for English learners with potential disabilities includes using assessments in the home language when appropriate and not identifying a disability based solely on limited English proficiency. The course material is explicit about both requirements. A is wrong because a below-grade score in English alone does not establish a disability. Doing so risks misidentifying language acquisition as a disability. B is wrong because skipping the evaluation would deny the student access to both language and disability-related services. The guideline calls for careful, language-sensitive evaluation, not avoidance. D is wrong because A, direct referral to special education without further assessment, ignores the home language consideration and risks misidentification. When an English learner struggles with reading, the challenge may stem from language acquisition, a learning disability, or both. Valid evaluation depends on methods that can actually tell these apart, but and that requires a language-sensitive approach tailored to each student's background. Both types of evaluation error harm students. Over-identification places English learners in special education when language acquisition is the real issue. Under-identification leaves students with genuine disabilities without the specialized instruction they need. Best practices include assessing in the student's home language, factoring in English proficiency when interpreting results, and gathering data over time rather than relying on a single assessment. Teams must never identify a disability based solely on limited English proficiency, and when a disability is confirmed, students receive both language acquisition services and disability-related services. In practice, a complete evaluation looks like this. The team uses the home language to test foundational skills, measures English proficiency separately, reviews classroom evidence over months, and only then draws a conclusion, one that may result in an IEP alongside continued English learner services. The key exam principle is this: English learners must not be excluded from disability evaluation. They must be evaluated with methods appropriate for their language background. Language-sensitive evaluation is the standard, not optional. Question 50. A new teacher asks her mentor whether Title III alone will cover the needs of an English learner who also has a diagnosed learning disability. The mentor explains that Title III supports a specific area and another federal law covers the rest. Which best captures the relationship between the two laws? Your options are: A. Title III replaces the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act when the student is an English learner. B. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act replaces Title III for any student with a disability. C. Title III is the only federal law that applies because English learners cannot have individualized education programs. D. Title III supports English language acquisition, while the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act can apply alongside it for the student's disability. Take a second. Which answer would you pick? The correct answer is D. Title III supports English language acquisition, while the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act can apply alongside it for the student's disability. D is correct because Title III specifically supports English language acquisition, and English learners with disabilities may also receive support through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act or a 504 plan. The course material explains that the two laws can apply alongside each other. A is wrong because Title III does not replace the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Each law addresses a different need. B is wrong because the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act does not replace Title III. The student's English language needs remain regardless of disability status. C is wrong because English learners can absolutely have individualized education programs. The course material is explicit that both supports can be provided when warranted. When an English learner also has a disability, two distinct federal laws come into play at the same time. Title III of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act governs language acquisition, while the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act governs specialized instruction for qualifying disabilities. These laws are not alternatives. They are designed to operate alongside each other. Title III addresses English language development, while IDEA addresses disability-related instruction. When a student qualifies under both, dual eligibility means both sets of services apply. The student does not choose one over the other. In practice, the two programs run in coordination. The English Learner program delivers language acquisition support, while the Special Education program delivers disability-specific instruction and accommodations. Regular team meetings ensure decisions in one area inform the other, so the student receives comprehensive support across both needs. The most common exam mistake is assuming that identifying a disability cancels a student's eligibility for English Learner services. That is explicitly wrong. A disability does not erase a language acquisition need, and a language need does not erase a disability. Coordinated services under both laws is always the correct standard. When you see an exam scenario describing an English learner with a disability, the answer will always recognize that both Title III and IDEA apply simultaneously, and that the school's responsibility is to coordinate services across both frameworks.
You have reached the end of our first question set. For the free complete exam preparation, visit our website link in the description, where you find thousands more practice questions and comprehensive study guides. Thanks for studying with us today. See you in the next video.